And we're on AM 1220 KHTS with a Santa Clarita Valley resident who's also a well-known TV news anchor in the Los Angeles market since 1992. Since late 2011, he's been with KTLA Channel 5. He's appeared in several movies and TV episodes also. And if you can believe his Twitter profile, he's also a dog lover, gym rat, reading fanatic, family man, gun owner, and Prius enthusiast. Not necessarily in that order, I'm sure.
All those, huh?
And he helps out with local nonprofits by emceeing events as often as he's able. His name is Rick Chambers. Welcome to Hometown Station, Rick.
I appreciate it. Nice to be here.
Okay, now we're in the middle of a really heavy news cycle. You've been out there covering some very intense stories. Tell us about the 10-year-old girl and the...
Well, we had the 10-year-old girl that was out in Northridge, the one that there were two guys that were out doing what's called a hot prowl, where they're breaking into homes while the people are sleeping, which is dangerous enough. And for one reason, the one guy that went into the house decided he was going to turn it into a kidnapping. And so he grabbed the little girl, 10 years old, at knife point out of her bedroom and brought her out to the car. Now, the way we understand it is that the guy driving the getaway car was surprised to see the little girl. He had no idea this was going to be a kidnapping. So what he does is drive them to what we think is an abandoned home nearby. And then he bails. He doesn't want any part of it. He's still getting charged with kidnapping because he moved her from spot to spot.
Right.
But our guess is probably that he'll roll over and testify against the other guy. But they still haven't found him yet. So.
Well, you were out there in the field covering that for a few days. We saw you numerous reports covering that as the story unfolded.
Yeah, it's not unusual. I go out into the field quite a bit during the course. Last night I was in Thousand Oaks for the two lovebirds, 13 and 14 years old, that are suicidal, possibly suicidal. And normally we wouldn't cover just a runaway. But because this one had that twist, that there was obviously something wrong, whether it was depression or whatever. And it was critical that they find these. They still haven't found them at this point, but it's critical that they find them as quickly as possible because they're not sure what's going to happen. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now let's get local for a minute. You're a local resident. How long have you lived in Santa Clarita?
Since '92. When I came out here, I came here from Miami in '92. Stayed in North Hollywood with my brother-in-law for a short period of time, and then I was going out with real estate agents trying to find a place. And we looked at Calabasas and some of these others. And then when I look back on it, it's funny now. The lady said, "Well, there's a new community, but it's pretty far out." And you got to drive all the way up to 5. And I said, well, but the critical thing was, she said it had great schools. And all three of my kids were young back then. And so we took this drive up the 5 into Santa Clarita. And the cows were still grazing along the 5 back in those days. And the mall had just opened. And it was great. And I immediately liked the place. And you got so much for your money, which was critical as well. And so that was it. When I brought Susie and the kids out, they loved the place, and all the kids went to all the public schools, and we've been out here enjoying it. Yeah.
Now, sounds good. Now, you've gotten involved in the community in more direct ways, helping out with local nonprofits. So tell us a little bit about your activities.
Well, that started out pretty quickly. Well, because the kids were in school, I started helping out at their schools, and going in and helping read on this day and do the show and tell and Dad's career and all that type of thing. And then as I got to know the community more, I started meeting other people, and they would ask, and so got involved with the Boys and Girls Club early on and have been emceeing their stuff for a long time. Carousel Ranch did stuff with them for a while, and it just was easy because people would come up and say, listen, can you help? And it's part of the community, so it was really kind of a no-brainer, And then once you got in there and met the people that were involved, then it just became one of those things that you would just do over and over and over again. And then you got to see, how good it was getting, and you got to see the improvements, and it was nice. It was a nice feeling.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there were several factors that we came up here. One was because you got so much for your money, and that was critical. The schools were paramount with doing it. But also, driving up and down the 101, looking at places along there, and then having to put up with the traffic.
Yeah, the killer commute.
That was just crazy. So we figured that was not the place to go. And this, by quick process of elimination, this became the obvious choice.
Well, now, you cover issues pretty much over the hill, but thankfully you live in Santa Clarita and you have an awareness of what's going on up here, probably maybe a little bit more than some of the other news anchors that are on LA stations. What do you think is the most pressing issue up here in Santa Clarita from your standpoint as a reporter and as a resident?
Well, right now, what's kind of hitting everybody in the face is the heroin problem that you've got up here, that we have up here. And I've done several stories on that, and then we tie it, of course, to the problems they're having in Simi Valley and Thousand Oaks as well. But, you know, after raising 3 kids, and very close to my kids, and so we communicate on a lot of different things, and when they were in high school, we would talk about the problems that the kids were having in school. And even after that, I was completely caught off guard as to how bad the heroin problem is. And then I was over at the sheriff's station one time, and a mom and father and a couple of the kids were coming in to claim the personal items of a girl who had just overdosed. And boy, when you see the looks on their face and you see the pain that they're in, suddenly it just kind of hits you right in the face that this is much more than you thought it was. And
it's not just your garden variety, everyday story.
This goes across all different types of the lines. You know, it's not just low-income folks. It's not one part of town. It's all over the Santa Clarita Valley. And we've talked to a lot of people that are doing a lot of good things out here, but it continues to be a huge problem. You know, when you're losing 10, 12, 14 people a year because of something like that, it's you got to start doing something.
It's alarming. It's alarming. The community's pretty much up in arms about that, and organizations like Action Family Zone and
right.
the city and the sheriffs are all and the schools.
Well, they're doing a lot.
They're trying to
get
together
what they can.
Put their heads together to come up with like a concerted effort, because that's really what it's going to take.
Well, and the drug problems have been around for years. I mean, I was back in high school in the 60s.
Right.
There were obviously drug problems back then and in the 70s. So it's not one of those things that's just going to go away. It's just the drug changes, the drug of choice changes. And in this case, back in our day, heroin, I didn't know anybody that was doing heroin. It was the junkie laying in the alley was the guy doing the heroin. Nowadays, it's so cheap, and the kids out here in this valley have money in their pockets.
Yep.
And there's a lot of peer pressure, and so you've got this drug that's floating around in circles you would not expect to find that drug.
Well, let's make a hard segue there. Let's jump back into your background. You're originally from the Chicago area, right?
Born and raised, yeah. Born there, and then went into the military right out of high school.
Right.
Back in the early 70s.
And then you were in the military 4 years?
Yeah, actually 2 in California. I was up in Merced, California for 2 years at Castle Air Force Base up there, and then I was lucky enough to go to London, England for 2 years, so that was nice.
Nice, and that was during the Vietnam era?
Yeah, I went in from 72 to 76. I was lucky that the draft was just kind of rolling up by the time that I got in, and my number would have been very high, so I wasn't worried about that. And my brother had been in back in the 60s, and I was one of those kids that, I really had no idea what the hell I wanted to do, and I was still kind of very green and immature in high school, and he recommended it as something that could kind of give me some direction.
What was that?
Went into the Air Force, and I was lucky enough to work in the hospital, and then I got a lot of great training. I was trained as a paramedic and a flight surgeon's assistant, and for me it was terrific, and that's what I thought I would do when I got out in 76. I was trained as an EMT and a paramedic, and came back, and EMTs were very popular in the States. Couldn't get a job. I thought I'd walk right in someplace with my training, and it just wasn't that way. So I took the GI Bill, went to college, and started as in a junior college, actually, like we would have College of the Canyons here. A very similar situation back in the Chicago suburbs, and I went there, and from there then went on to a 4-year school, and one thing led to another.
Sounds good. Now, at what point did the name change happen?
That was kind of funny. I was working in Harrisburg, Illinois, which was a tiny little town way down at the southern tip of Illinois, down where the Ohio River and the Mississippi kind of come together. And I've been there about a year, maybe 13 months, and a buddy of mine that I'd been in college with had gone to Louisville, Kentucky, to a great station there, Wave TV. And he wrote back and said, listen, there's a guy leaving, and send a tape, you might be able to get on there. And so I sent a tape, and it was 3/4, remember those days, 3/4 tape. Sent one of those, and got a response, and the guy said, well, come on in. And so I interviewed, and everything went well, and they decided to hire me. And while I'm waiting for that transition period, the news director calls me and says, listen, what would you think about changing your name? And I said, well, geez, I hadn't given any thought. And he said, well, and my name it's just 3 letters, and it's Irish Dutch, and it's hard to pronounce, and if you see it. And I said, well, what are you thinking? They said, well, just think of something and then get back to us. And so I walked around the station like you would here at the radio station, looking at people, and Rick Johnson and Rick Michaels and there was a guy named Greg Chambers sitting at the switcher in the control room, and as I walked past him, I looked at him, I thought, all right, Rick Chambers. I said, well, that doesn't sound too bad. And so I called the folks in Louisville, and I said, what do you think about Rick Chambers? And they said, do you like it? And I said, yeah, it's okay. They said, okay, that's what it is. And yeah, it was that quick, and then it stuck. And I've gotten used to it, obviously, over the years.
So pronounce the real name?
Gue.
Gue.
Yeah.
As in Q.
Yeah, it's like glue without the L.
Gotcha.
But when you see it written down, very, very seldom will people get it correct. And so Louisville, Kentucky, kind of a waspy Bible Belt type of place. And the guy there was thinking, most of these people here are not going to recognize how to pronounce that, so let's make it something a little more easy. So
you went from waspy Louisville down to hell-raising Miami. What was that experience
Well,
like?
And I got there right in the 80s, the late 80s, and
when
crack cocaine was
drugs
exploding.
were everywhere.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was unbelievable. The kids were all small. Actually, I only had 2, and then the third one was actually born in Miami. So I got there at a time where the city was really in turmoil. Politicians were getting ousted left and right. The corruption was skyrocketing. Drugs were bad. South Beach really was not much of anything. It was kind of a slum. A lot of
it was an old Jewish ghetto, basically.
Yeah, back from when all the winter folks would come down, the snow bunnies. And so when I got there, there was very much a big change underway. The Mariel boat lifts had come out not too long prior to that. They were still having the Cubans coming over. Haitians were floating in on rafts. I mean, it was kind of an unusual place. And so, yeah, moving into there, but as a reporter, it was phenomenal. I mean, there was so much going on.
Yeah, a lot of great stories.
Terrific stories.
And a lot of entertainment going on down there. A lot of entertainers are based there that are pretty well known, pretty famous.
Yeah, over by the Fontainebleau Hotel and on the South Beach. And actually, while I was there was a lot of money starting to come from the LA industries, the film industries, the modeling industries, and they were really starting to pump a lot of money into South Beach. And a lot of those hotels, little kind of boutique places started to pop up. And it really, by the time I left in '92, right before Hurricane Andrew, actually, which was great timing, things there were really starting to look nice. And of course now Miami's like one of the hot spots in the whole country.
So KNBC wooed you away from Miami?
Yeah,
out to the left coast?
It was an unusual circumstance. I was competing I was working with an independent Fox station there. It had been NBC and then changed over. It was a family-owned place. And they were kind of making it into a little mini CNN, pumping a lot of money into it. They were sending us all over the place. And it was a lot of fun to work at. And there was a lady over at the NBC affiliate who competed against us, who was hired here in Los Angeles. And I got a call one day and said, listen, NBC's taking me to Los Angeles. I was wondering if you wanted to go and anchor out there. And it caught me off guard. We had never, my wife Susie and I, had never even really thought about coming to Los Angeles. We were pretty comfortable in Miami, and it was a good place to work. And so we came out here, and suddenly this whole door opened. I mean, it was something much more than I anticipated it would be, and the money was terrific, and it turned out to be a great move.
No, I read that it was $500,000. Was that correct?
When I first came here?
Yeah.
No.
That's usually incorrect.
Yeah, not to go to NBC. No. But it was a substantial increase over Miami. In fact, I think they tripled what I was making in Miami to come out here, and which at the time, back in '92, was great money. Yeah, I mean, it'd be great money even right now. But what excited me more was when I got into the newsroom, the number of huge faces that you saw walking around the newsroom at that point. That was incredible. A lot of these people have gone on to network jobs and stuff. And then it was the final months of Johnny Carson, and who I had grown up watching. And now I'm parking my car at the back of NBC and walking up past, people that are coming in for the final 2 or 3 months of his show. And so I was starstruck by all of that. And it was just a great time to be here. Although I got here, I started work at NBC on a Monday, and the riots broke out on Wednesday. So that was...
And that was my next question. Your first assignment was probably, one of the ones that introduced you, shall we say, to the LA market in a big way.
Well, yeah, I think it made my career, maybe, or certainly was key in molding my career here in Los Angeles. Nobody had even seen my face, heard my name prior to that Wednesday evening.
Tell me what happened when the assignment desk gave you the assignment and said, get down there and
well,
see what you can do.
It wasn't even that. I had been doing the paperwork on Monday and Tuesday, like you do when you go to a new place. And on Wednesday, they said, okay, well, we're going to put you with a crew, and you go out and watch how they do the stuff in the live trucks, and so you can kind of get a feel for how we do things here. Thought, great. We went out on this truck. That morning, everybody knew the verdict was going to come down, or could be coming down.
The Rodney King verdict.
Rodney King. And they sent me to Foothill, to the Foothill Division, where he was arrested. And we were out there, and I'm just watching the live crew, and they're doing their stuff, and they're putting up the mast, and this and that. And then I was actually leaning against one of the black and white squad cars, listening to the verdict with the cops. And as soon as the verdict came down, you could see that the cops knew that something was going to happen.
The stuff was going to hit the fan.
They pulled away, and I'm there, and I'm kind of, and still, I'm still naive as to exactly what all is going on here, because I hadn't been following it as closely, obviously, as people here in town had. And then suddenly crowds started to gather on the sidewalk. They moved a lot of police officers with their helmets and batons and shields and stuff in front of the police station. And so we were all lined up on the yellow stripe going down the middle of the boulevard there, and had the cameras up, and I was still not expecting to be going on the air. And as the crowds got bigger and bigger and bigger, suddenly there was a shot fired from the crowd, and everybody hit the ground. And the guy that had fired the shot ran, so everybody knew who that was. Well, the cops on the side of the street ran. They were following him. The cameras went off the tripods. We were following them. So suddenly, the Foothill was one of the ignition places.
One of the flash points.
And then we started hearing about what was happening in Florence and Normandy and other places around town. And suddenly it became anybody that could talk, get on camera.
Right.
And so I got thrown basically into the frying pan like you hear. And it was one of those things where you're the start of an 18-hour shift, and you're on almost constantly. So it was amazing.
Well, you rocked that.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it.
Well, I'm going to scope the next several years pretty tightly here. After KNBC, it was Channel 13 for a bit.
Yeah, that was actually a nice opportunity. I had never actually watched Channel 13, didn't even know what kind of news that they did. But suddenly they had new management come in. They were going to revamp the whole place, redid the whole newsroom, the studio, brought in top to bottom the whole management team, and asked me if I'd like to come over with Lauren Sanchez, who became Fox Entertainment and that type of thing. And the two of us worked together. We had a great team on TV, and did very well. The numbers were great. We won some of the first Emmys the station had ever won for news. And we did a lot of things, and it was great the way they were putting it all together, and everybody was very excited. And then about, I guess about 20 months into the 3-year contract there, Fox bought the place, and it immediately went into the toilet. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, and then the next one after that was KCAL and then KCBS, 2003.
Yeah, and that actually I had been sick for a while, and had ulcerative colitis, and had my plumbing all rearranged and a lot of it yanked out, and was in bad shape. I was off the air for about 10 months, and a lot of people thought that I had cancer. I'd lost 50, 60 pounds. I looked terrible. And once I was able to kind of regain my strength, it was nice enough for some of the old people that I had known for years that were at CBS KCAL called up one day and said, listen, are you feeling well? Are you ready to go back to work? And this was some of the big fires back in the, I can't remember what year it was, but it was right around 2001, something like that. And there were big fires burning. And they said, you want to come back and go out and cover some of the fires for us? And that was what opened the door and got into CBS KCAL, and those folks were terrific.
And how did you land at KTLA?
That was another, right at the end of 2008 and 2009 when the economy was tanking, and everybody was laying off. Back in those days, the television stations all depended, probably 25 or 30% of their revenue was on car dealerships, and the car dealerships started folding one after another, and so the stations were losing a tremendous amount of revenue, and everybody coming up to contract was getting laid off. And CBS KCAL laid off about 20, 25 of us, and then The next wave was all the department heads, and after that was the whole sales staff. And I mean, so it was a bloodletting all around town, all the different stations. So it wasn't one of those situations where you could leave CBS KCAL and call somebody else, because they were going through the same thing. Nobody was hiring. So for 20 months, I was off the television doing that type of thing, and instead started doing voiceover work and commercial work, and started doing some of the movie stuff. But it was a rough time. Being laid off and not knowing when you're getting back. For a while, I never thought I would get back into news. It was just so tough for the first year and a half or 2 years, and I thought, well, maybe this is that. And I kept hearing, in fact, I got sick of people saying, you got to reinvent yourself. I can't tell you how many times I heard that phrase. And I would start doing things and try other opportunities, and it just wasn't something that I was thrilled with doing. And so I would do it for as long as we had to do it, and then I'd keep looking. And then one day, out of the blue, one of the guys from CBS KCAL was now working at KTLA, and he's my boss now. And one of the executive producers called up and said, listen, we know that you're not back on the air yet, but Jason, the news director, wants to know if you'd like to come to KTLA. And I was completely shocked by it. And they said, and this was like Tuesday, and I said, well, what are you thinking? They said, well, can you start Thursday night? And I said, sure, I'll be there. And,
Well, that's a heck of a run in the #2 media market
yeah.
to last 20 years plus.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I've been lucky. I've obviously I've been working hard, and I like to think that I've been out there busting my ass and doing things the way they should be done. But at the same time, I've got some lucky breaks here and there. And, just being available at certain times when people needed certain things, and so it's a combination of things. But yeah, it's been a good run.
Well, you mentioned working hard. That brings me to my next question. Your process. When I first met you, you were covering the Teens Tell It Like It Is anti-drug forum
Sure.
at Action Family Zone,
Right.
and I accosted you in your truck outside as you were
Yeah, I remember.
as you were just about to file your report, and gave me a great 45-second bit for my story, which was really cool. But I'm just curious about your process, and maybe you could give us a rundown of what happens when you get after you get an assignment. We got a taste of it with the riot story, but
Yeah.
When you get an assignment, what's the process in actually going and doing the interview,
Yeah.
gathering the information, and filing the story?
Well, as soon as you get to the station, you've got a few minutes to kind of get your act together and check maybe a couple of sources that you've been working, or stories that have been in the news lately, just to kind of update things. And then it's a meeting. Everybody that's working that day, the shooters, the reporters, the producers, everybody meets in the conference room. You start throwing ideas around as to who's going to do what. There's obviously several big stories that have been working all day. And then once you get your assignment, then they select a photographer that's going to work with you. You hook up with that photographer, you decide, okay, here's what we're doing. This is the file video we need to take with us from the library. Here's where we're going. I'll make a couple of calls, try to set up interviews for us. If it's a story that's breaking, you try to get out the door as quickly as you possibly can. If it's something else where you've got some time, you kind of get all your ducks in a row. You're going to need several pictures, you're going to need some addresses, some phone numbers. And then once you get out the door, you're on your own. I'll call back and forth to the desk occasionally. Can they run this license plate? Can they do this? Can they do that? But other than that, you're out there getting the story, and then it's a matter of making contact with the people that you think are involved with the story, trying to sort through all the extraneous stuff and just get down to the kind of the meat and the potatoes of the whole thing. And then it's just a matter of picking out what you think are the most compelling sound, the most compelling pictures, writing a script that kind of tells the story, and you kind of connect the dots of the sound that you've already heard. And then it's putting it together. And almost every night it's got to be less than 2 minutes. You seldom get more than 2 minutes to tell the story. So you really have to think quickly on your feet and put all this together. You have deadlines like you do. You got to be on the air at certain times, and if you're not there, you got black holes in the newscast, and people are going to get pissed.
Yeah, well, you're looking to have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right, just like any story you would tell somebody sitting across the coffee table or the kitchen table. You start the story, you give them all the stuff in the middle, and then somehow you close it off, whether it's good or bad. But it's the same way on television, but you just have to, it's obviously a visual medium, and so you got to make sure that your pictures are matching what you're saying. and that the sound makes sense, and that everything just kind of flows together, and at the end of the 2 minutes or the minute 45, you can sit back and think, yeah, okay, yeah, that was understandable, now I know what happened. You know, hopefully you do.
And then what happens when you go back to the newsroom?
Well, once like last night, I was in Thousand Oaks doing the live shot, and got that done, and we had one of the dog handlers meet us out there in Thousand Oaks, so we had that part of the story, and it all came together well, and then when we got done, we head back to the station and put what we shot, we give it to the people on the desk, so the next crew coming in, if they're going to pick up that story, they've got things to work with, but you get immediate feedback when you get back. Either your stuff looked great, nobody else had what you had, or somebody's asking you, listen, the folks on Channel 7 or NBC had X, Y, and Z, why didn't you have X, Y, and Z? And so you know immediately whether your work that day was good, or it was marginal, or it was less than what it should have been.
You spoke a few minutes ago about the hiatus when you were, between jobs basically, and we're doing voiceovers and acting and stuff. I wanted to ask about a couple of those projects. There's one called Legit.
Legit, yeah. It's a funny show. And
Episode's titled Bag Lady.
Yeah.
According to IMDb, it aired in March 2013.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Mitch.
It's a TV series, and when the director and the producer came to me, they said, listen, we're doing a show, and you're going to be anchoring a morning news, very similar to the kind of happy talk craziness that we see in Los Angeles on some of the morning shows. And it's going to be playing in the background while the main characters of the show are doing their thing here, and then we're going to pop you on the screen. So we want you just to ad-lib. There were no lines. We were just in there ad-libbing, and I had a lady working with me as my co-anchor on the set who was very funny. And so it was a chance just to get in there and do something I had never done before. And when we got done, and it did air, and I think I was on the screen for probably about 8 or 9 seconds. It wasn't much. The show was very well done, but it's kind of a raw type of comedy. It's probably not suitable for everybody, but it was one of those things where I was glad I got a chance to do it, and they said we'll probably do more of it, so that was fun.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
And some of the roles that you played have not been as news anchor, not playing yourself,
which is very seldom. There was a comedy. And actually, I saw that it was advertised not too long ago that we did about 3 years ago, where I played a detective. That's, I guess, coming out pretty soon.
Does that Run This Town? Agent
No.
Logan?
No. Oh, that's where I played a federal agent.
Okay.
That was more of a web series.
Okay.
Again, a lot of these things are very creative people trying to make a mark for themselves in their field, and they're doing these things on a shoestring. And both of those that you just mentioned were when I was just starting to get into this type of thing, and I was looking for anything out there that would help me kind of get into this field. And both of those were done by people that were terrific to me and helped me a lot. So can't say enough about it.
According to IMDb, there's another airing coming up, an episode of The Mentalist. It's going to be airing on Friday, April 12th.
Done those, and Rizzoli and Isles, as well as a detective show. Those were great. And again, it's fun to do, but at the same time, the people that are part of these shows are very nice to me, and they really help me a lot too. And then I've been lucky enough to work with some good directors. Tony Scott, before he died, when we did the train movie, and I'm trying to Unstoppable. That was fun. I had never met him before, and he was a real nice guy and very nice to me. And then more recently, working with the folks with the big White House movie that's out now about the terrorists taking over the White House.
Yeah, yeah. And what was your role in that one?
I was again the news guy. It's usually those types of parts that that I end up, but that's in my wheelhouse. So it's nice to go in and do those types of things, and it's a kick for me because I get to see how it all works behind the scenes. And
yeah, you're referencing Olympus Has Fallen.
Olympus Has Fallen. It's out now.
It's kind of interesting because you're carrying on sort of a tradition. In not just KTLA folks like Stan Chambers,
sure,
and there's Cleet Roberts from Channel 2 and Jerry Dunphy from Channel 7. They would be in movies all the time.
Yeah.
They would be the go-to people for the movie business if they needed a TV anchor in one of their scenes or something. So you're kind of carrying that torch.
Yeah, and actually it's nice. It's one of those things where when I first got out here, and even when I was in Miami, I would see some of these. And when I got here, people would say, "Oh, that's Stu. He's done such the Rocky movies or whatever." But it never dawned on me that that would be something that I would be able to get into. And now that I have, it's a lot of fun. In fact, I'm shooting another one at the end of the month. So it's called The Incident.
The Incident, and what's that about?
The Heaven's Gate mass suicides down in San Diego.
Right, right.
Again, I'm the news guy. So.
Well, now, any parting shots? Anything that you'd like to tell the community about yourself that we haven't covered?
Well, I've been out here long enough, so I run into so many people that I think most people know the backstory. It's always one of the things that I like about living out here is that, in fact, I was at the Albertsons over on Bouquet just a short time ago, just picking up some stuff and saw people and, say hi to people. And it's nice that the people out here just kind of know what you're doing and they know who you are and they just kind of respect your space, and it's not a big deal to anybody, and you see people in restaurants and everybody says hi and this, and so it makes you feel good. It makes you feel as if people are watching and they like what they see, or at least they're telling you they like what you see, and you hope that's true. But that's why it's one of the nice things about living out here. It's that it's not a big deal. You know what I mean? You're just the guy that does the news.
It's also cool that you're so accessible. Because a lot of people are on a star trip, let's face it, and you're not, as far as we can tell.
What? Yeah, the prima donna. To me, it's always been, kind of a nice experience that once you get off and then you can go and talk to the kids, or you go and speak at the high schools or this or that, and then just to have that interaction with the people on the streets is nice, and it's and everybody here treats you nicely too, which is great.
Well, special thanks to our guest Rick Chambers for appearing with us on KHTS AM 1220, your hometown station. I'm Stephen K. Peeples, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.